to our City Commission study session. In accordance with the Kansas Open Meetings Act, the meeting can be viewed on Channel 2 via Facebook Live. Public is encouraged to view the meeting using one of those options. The Leavenworth City Commission meeting is open to the public with limited seating capacity. To mitigate the spread of COVID-19, face coverings and social distancing is required to attend the meeting. To attend the meeting in person, email cwilliamson@firstcity.org no later than 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting to reserve a seat. Seats are available on a first-come, first-served basis. First item on the study session is rental property coordinator update. Mr. Lawrence Levine, sorry.
There you go. So, good evening, Mayor Bowder, Commissioner Preisinger, Commissioner Griswold, Commissioner Wilson, Commissioner Leonhard. It's great to see everybody in person, I have to say, after the year of COVID. Next slide, please. You created this position in January of 2020, and I do make sure I tell folks when they have good things to say about it that this was a position created by our elected city commission. It's just about a year old now, so I want to kind of give you a progress report. As Commissioner Wilson and I were saying on the way in, I'm hesitant to say it's been a good year after a year of COVID, but it has been a productive year. Our caseload, the process that we established last year and you were all briefed on last June, has continued to grow and mature. We had 262 cases last year. It's actually up to 90 cases for 2021. Those are the numbers from last Friday. As a result of the fact that folks coming for assistance, I do get to check the registration. The registration rate for properties that are requesting assistance is now up over 80%. I think it's actually up to as much as 86%. Paul had asked me for a process last year to measure success. And one of the ways we've done that is with the resolution rate. So of all of those cases, the resolution rate's currently running almost 70%. Now that doesn't mean everybody's always happy. Sometimes one person is happy and one person is not. But the person who has come to the city asking for assistance is received a level of resolution that they asked for. Unfortunately, about 20% of the cases end up being closed. That means we weren't able to provide a positive outcome for the person who requested it, or the person who had requested help has simply, stops communicating with us. I've had 2 cases in municipal court. We're running 2-0. And the fact that we've been successful in doing that, I think, does send a message, and it makes my job a lot easier. And that when I'm working with other landlords and property owners, we generally have a very good cooperation rate in resolving the issues that we are raising with them. The new position, you couldn't have timed it better if you'd planned it that way. It gave the city a capacity that we would not otherwise have had during the period of the pandemic. So one of the very positive things we're able to do when Kansas came up with an eviction prevention program, I was able to field a lot of those issues. Paul Kramer signed us up as a community partner, so we had a direct relationship with the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, and we're able to really provide the kind of one-on-one and successful service that I think we want to be able to provide for our citizens. We did get compliments from the Resources Corporation. We had one of the highest application rates and also one of the lowest reject rates for all the folks that we helped. Of those 20 landlords and over 40 families, we were able to help distribute almost $75,000 in assistance that went directly to those small businesses who are our landlords and property owners. The follow-on to this program is going to be the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which I will talk a little bit about. It started yesterday. We actually had our first successful application today over at the Workforce Development Center, which Mayor Bowder had lauded for the work that they did for us before. They will continue to do a great job for us with this program. Next slide, please. One of the nice things about this particular program is it's allowed us in the first year of this program to really develop relationships with landlords and tenants and create, I think, the positive atmosphere that we're looking for. This is an example. I provide these statistics once a week up to my boss, Julie Hurley, And it gives you an idea kind of how things have shaken out. Maintenance, not unexpectedly, is one of the highest categories. Rental assistance, and I think that is unique to the era of the pandemic, has obviously been very significant with the support that we've provided, working in partnership with our other community agencies, the United Way, the Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, the Interfaith Community of Hope. Evictions, still is an issue, and I do have a slide later on to talk about our trend over the last 3 years there. Neighbor issues is something that we've added. The opportunity for neighbors of rental property to have someone to call if they have a concern, I think, has been another one of the benefits and positive things we've seen from the program. And actually, if you look and combine infestation and mold as a single category, that would come up as like number 4. So that's obviously been an issue as well. With mold, we don't actually have statutory or legal authority to address it specifically. But what we've been able to do is through the International Property Maintenance Code, which you codified last April, I'm able to go in, and when there's an underlying plumbing issue that is feeding the mold, that's actually what we end up addressing. So we make sure a tenant is not in a position of cleaning up mold and then having it come back again because there's still a leak. Next slide, please. So now I want to look at some additional accomplishments. We had a great handoff of the registration database from the clerk's office. And the underlying program, Access is an older program, but the design of what was there was solid. And the most important thing for us is the information. I now have this program up and on my computer every day. I'm able to go back and reference the historic data that we have. We are continuing to update that information, which you're going to see on the next slide. And over time, there's about 7,000 records there. There's a lot of information there. We will continue to update and improve that. Before Dave Griffith's untimely passing, he and I had been working on an initiative to update the graphic side of what we're presenting in rental property. That will also continue to be a future project as we're able to continue to upgrade the data that we have in the database. The tenant-based rental assistance grant, which you approved last June, we did receive approval for that back in December. We've been awarded an $85,000 grant. And what we want to do is use this money, particularly as we have CARES Act and COVID funding, to help with folks who are having other forms of rental distress, is to focus this on those working families with school-aged children. I've met with Jake Potter from USD 453. I've also reached out to the Alliance Against Family Violence, and also will reach out to our parochial schools. But the goal here is to provide that extra boost to a working family who, for example, if you have 2 adults and 3 children in the household, and those children are of mixed gender, there should be 3 bedrooms. Home has never been more important than it's been during the era of COVID. And we have families that are in that situation that are living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So what this TBRA grant will allow us to do, this is not a substitute for the HUD Choice Voucher Program, also known as Section 8. It's not a substitute for subsidized housing, but this could give that family that extra $100 a month that they might be able to move from a 1-bedroom to a 2- or 3-bedroom apartment. In a situation where we have a single parent who is living with an abusive significant other, technically that counts as a homeless family. And part of what these funds can allow us to do is, it's very difficult to get out of a relationship like that. There are expenses involved, the rent deposit, the security deposit for your utilities. This program provides that type of assistance to provide this level of help and care to some of our other vulnerable residents. You see that our rental registration rate has increased. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. I have since been certified as a HUD housing quality inspector, so I am able to do that in concert with Pat Tooley. TBRA grant homes will have to meet HUD housing quality standards. As an example of the kind of networking and interactions that we have, I was invited to attend a Zoom meeting with the Director of the Department of Children and Family Services, Laura Howard, last week. Now, that was set up by Governor Kelly to help address the spike in utility bills that we're expecting to see after the extreme weather. But we invited in our other community partners. That this was also attended by Catholic Charities, the Salvation Army, and the Interfaith Community of Hope. So you see the community working together in a network. One of the issues we raised, we got asked if there's one thing we could tell the governor, what would that be? And it's the need to provide assistance with the unemployment problem. At least almost a dozen of the folks that I am currently helping right now are folks who were receiving unemployment, and that was then cut off when the new software system came on board, and their records were flagged for fraud. Now, somebody else may have fraudulently accepted their benefits, but the individual who legitimately needed the benefits was then put into a crunch and didn't have funds. We feel pretty good about the fact that we're able to help folks in situations like that. Next slide, please. So as we continue to look, we do want to talk a little bit about those rental registration statistics. That's where this program started back in 2009 as a rental registration program. You've been briefed before on kind of the percentages, our properties versus our residential units, and we are the second highest rate of rentals in the state of Kansas. Manhattan, Kansas has 62% rentals. We're standing between 51 and 52%. But the progress from the last time I had the opportunity to brief you, we're now up to 54% of our rentals that are registered. That's a 12% increase. You see that properties requiring updates are also getting updated, and the number of unregistered properties is decreasing. We did lose Vermont, though. We had 48 states. We're now only down to 47 states in the United States where somebody owns rental property in Leavenworth, Kansas. Next slide, please.
Wow.
So want to talk a little bit about the revenue that's coming in. You know, we see we've had almost a 60% increase in what we're bringing in rental registration. That's a good thing. 2021 data is now almost $400. So you see we're on track to have another good year for bringing in the revenue and reducing the number of unregistered properties. I do want to highlight for the commission that our $20 one-time registration for an unlimited number of properties is a very, very good deal. This chart gives you a comparison of other jurisdictions in the state and the rates that they charge. In some cases, certain jurisdictions have mandatory inspections that are part of their registration process. I'm making no recommendation at this time. I just want to present this information to the commission so they see how our program compares to folks in other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So some updates and information. We've learned a lot over the last year. I think that's the benefit of a position like this. It does provide the kind of information that you and Paul Kramer can use in making management decisions for the city. We are seeing a shift in the market. There are fewer lower cost rentals, which I will talk about in more detail in the next slide. But also several of our older and established owners have been selling off properties. We know that Woodland Village has a new owner out of Seattle. They've made some significant investments in that property. Pin Oaks, which has been a long time property that we've had in town, has been sold off. So this does create fewer options for some of our low-income tenants or tenants with credit issues. The shifting market is something that's actually being mentioned at the national level. I've had some of our property managers tell me that Leavenworth is actually mentioned at times in the trade publications within the property management industry. One of the things that we've learned as we've gone through this process is I go and do the code inspection inside when I'm invited. We're often find, well, I don't want to say often, we occasionally find that a defect is the result of work that was done without proper permits. And I'm working through Julie and Hal and his team just to make sure that they're aware of that. They actually caught a landlord a couple weeks ago with a tip from one of our tenants who was doing some work that was not properly permitted. Because part of my training was to go out with Hal's folks and learn how this is done. And the thing I will tell you that I think we can all take some pride in, when our folks go out and inspect, you're not going to find a safety issue. There is a value to that permit cost that a homeowner pays to have our folks inspect. Got a lot of positive feedback from our local organizations. That's tenants, that's landlords, that's our social organizations. Tenants appreciate having someone to call. And again, I tell them, hey, you really want to thank somebody, thank your elected officials who put this program into place. I've had landlords talk about long-term development. Obviously, Julie is working with them from a planning and community development perspective. But, you know, one of the suggestions that was made to me was, hey, can we come up with a logo or something that property managers can put on their ads to say that they are registered with the city of Leavenworth? So we are having, especially our larger property managers who see this as something value added. So that's something to look at. Obviously, the local organizations have been the key to housing stability. You know, whether it's working with, you know, DCF, Department of Aging, Council on Aging, the different organizations in town. Clearly, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Interfaith Community of Hope, those organizations that fall under the umbrella for the United Way, that's part of what makes something like this a successful program. It does enhance living and making Leavenworth a great place to live and raise a family. On an area of concern, we do have rental properties in town on federal properties. I don't want to single anybody out in a public meeting, but one of the things you find is that they are not subject to regulation by the Public Utilities Commission for their utilities. So we do have an issue, and this may be something we want to address at a time in the future, to ensure that they provide the same level of service to their tenants as would be a property owner who falls under Public Utilities Commission. So what we've seen, for example, is a tenant who does not receive a bill for 6 months, then gets a one-time lump sum bill. Were they under the Public Utilities Commission, they can go and they can request extended payment plan. Under a case like this, we've actually had tenants receive eviction notices unless they pay that off immediately. So that's something we want to look at. Another impact of this, I'm not, just as an observation, my office is over with the Leavenworth Housing Authority and with Planners 2. We are seeing some increased traffic there, and that may be something we need to or choose to address at some point in the future. I'll keep you informed. Next slide, please. So I want to talk, and I apologize, this was not meant to be an eye chart. These are from public websites, but just to give you some contextual information, we are seeing an increase in our rents. The last time I briefed you, the average apartment rent in Leavenworth, Kansas was about $810. Since June of last year when we briefed, we've seen a $21 increase, $41 since the position was created. And one of the significant things, we've seen a 5% drop in those rentals that are in the $500 to $700 range. We've seen a 4% increase in those in the $700 and $1,000 range. So that's just something to be aware of. We do see seasonal fluctuations in these, which you'll see in more detail. Next slide, please. And again, just looking for information. This is a study session. I want to keep the commission informed. You can see our rates for a one-bedroom apartment. Potentially what we had was a COVID dip after February 2020. I can't say that definitively, but the graphic does tend to suggest that. And you've seen where those rates on a one-bedroom apartment are now climbing back up again. You can see kind of the steady growth over time. Next slide, please. As you look at a two-bedroom apartment, a little bit, not enough data to really be concerned or whether it's a trend, but you do note a significant spike, at least from this data that's being collected by a private website, in the cost of a two-bedroom apartment in Leavenworth in the last couple of weeks. Next slide, please. And then 3 bedrooms, again, hard to tell. This, from what we had looked at when we were doing the TBRA grant, is actually an area we probably could use an increased number of 3-bedroom apartments in the community based on our population. But you see the kind of fluctuation that goes on. I guess the good news is as 1-bedrooms have increased, we've actually seen a decrease in 3-bedroom. That may have something to do with the cycle in and out of Fort Leavenworth or other demographic trends in town. I don't specifically have that information. Next slide, please. already emphasized the networking and the relationships. It's absolutely key. This is pretty much the same slide you got briefed the last time. Some of the things we're seeing is I've now been invited to occasionally attend meetings with the HUD-VASH folks at the VA because of the number of our clients who are veterans and who are on that program. Obviously, having an office right next to Pat Tooley and being able to learn more about that program but also exchange information is very helpful. Department of Child and Family Services, it's taken some time, but we've developed relationships where I now do have that opportunity to make a call to some of the caseworkers to consult with them. I'm not always sure the right way to handle some of the issues that we see, and being the interesting and diverse community that we are, we do sometimes have some very interesting challenges. So that's been helpful. I think one of the opportunities as we move out of the era of COVID will be to work with the Chamber of Commerce. I see Wendy's here today. We've worked with Main Street before, and just continuing to interact with those different agencies within town. I will say that a frustration has been working with the Department of Labor. You know, I have that case when I get a tenant who calls up who says, look, I just lost my unemployment, I can't pay my rent, I just got a 3-day notice, my landlord's going to evict me. It would be nice if I were able to pick up the phone and have a communications avenue to talk to somebody at DOL to see if we might be able to remedy that problem. But I understand that agency has its own challenges which it's facing. Next slide, please. So the downside to this, and you know, these are sometimes difficult statistics to look at, but I think they're important ones to bring to our attention, are our eviction rates. Now, when I took on the position, I was asked to look at some of the things that might be metrics that would tell us if we were having success. You do see that we've had a reduction in evictions from 2019. Obviously, a lot of that has been the CARES Act funding, the CDBG funding that we've provided. We are putting together a program and a strategy within the community that provides that safety net, if you will. But it is gratifying to see when we're able to provide that assistance where, you know, in some cases it may be they're not evicted, that the family may end up having to move out at some point, but not having that stigma in their file, that they're in a better position when they go to rent again. I think this is actually probably has an element of good news to it, kind of a silver lining, where we do have the programs, and fortunately we've had the money to be able to help out both our tenants and the landlords who are the ones who file the evictions. And hopefully we'll see some continued benefit from this over time. And again, you know, the fact that this position provided us that capacity, I don't always know what the data means. I just want to present it to you. You can see the average rent of somebody who's been evicted went from $719 up to $780 in 2020, probably reflective of the fact that families who were a little bit better off, who are not used to having challenges in paying the rent, were challenged under COVID-19. We're starting to see that dip back down again. You also see in the records from the district court the average judgment, how far in debt a family got before a landlord took that move to evict the family. Next slide, please. We all know Sister Vickie Perkins is just an asset to our community and a force of nature. I had the opportunity to sit down with her last week, and she provided an update of some of the initiatives that she's involved in. Her office, as I think most of us know, is now over at the Glimmer of Light Fellowship Ministries. She felt it was important to talk about there are two different populations that we are providing service to. Families who need assistance, and that's sometimes a temporary and transitory thing, and families who do need a deeper level of supporting services. She's been in discussion with Habitat for Humanity. I think we know there was a project a few years ago. Her thought is perhaps having the Habitat come in and build a fourplex in Leavenworth may be an idea, and she's in discussions with folks to talk about that. Both through Sister Vickie and through some of our businesses in town, there's been discussions about low-income housing tax credits. And that may be something to look at over time. Sister Vickie is also involved in outreach to state legislatures. And she had an interesting insight about working with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. I believe they have projects in 6 major cities across the country, and using the contacts and connections that she's developed over a lifetime of service, she's looked to see if she might generate some interest in bringing some of that to Leavenworth, Kansas, or to our area. Next slide, please. So as we look at way ahead, I mean, as we prepare to wrap up, I think we want to continue to look at the code enforcement side of my job. I obviously came into this thinking that was going to be the bulk of what I do. It's ended up being about half code enforcement, about half social services, which is probably the right blend. But continuing to do that, and that continues to raise the quality of our rental housing stocks and inventory. I think one of the things that the era of COVID and these programs have brought out, our landlords are vital local businesses. They provide a service, and we need to keep them viable as well. And the programs and support that we've had, both at the city level and the support that we've had from the state and federal level, has allowed them to see that we value them as local businesses as well. The assistance that we've provided across the board, tenants, landlords, and neighbors, we want to continue that and just get the word out. I still run into folks who aren't aware of the programs and services that are available, so there is an education aspect to the position. Continuing the rental registration and that teamwork. I mean, we have a network and web within the city of Leavenworth that is just absolutely phenomenal for taking care of people. Education and outreach, obviously that was difficult under COVID, but we'll want to continue and expand that as we get into the next year. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my presentation. What are your questions?
Well, I just had something, Sister Vickie, I just met with her today too, and that fourplex is just one of the, I mean, was just an idea. So that there are a lot of options that we need to talk about as a community. So that was just one small thing of several things that we were talking about. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And there is a lack of affordable rental properties in Leavenworth. Any questions from you guys?
You mentioned in one of the earlier slides that one of the programs you inspect to HUD standards. It's not HUD, I can't remember which program you're talking about.
TBRA, yeah.
I'm sorry?
The TBRA, yeah.
What are some common gigs that you would gig a house on that normally would not be a negative thing? That, the landlord will say, hey, wait a minute, that's a little bit over the top.
That's a great question, and I would say Pat Tooley has far more experience than I do in doing the HUD inspections. But one of the things I learned from taking the training that I've started to incorporate into my inspections now is looking at electrical outlets. It's amazing when you go into a home with a tester, how many outlets you may find that are not wired properly. And I actually look at that and think that's not necessarily something a landlord's going to say, hey, that's out of bounds. It's, wow, I didn't know that, and I really want to fix that because there are potential liabilities that come if there's an issue with the electric. Some of what the HUD program gets into that's not part of our normal program is the lead levels. We had a scare earlier this year where we did have a child test at elevated blood lead levels. Fortunately, what was required after the finger stick was a more detailed blood test. They found out that the test may have just been an anomaly. But that's something HUD looks at, because when you look from a national perspective, there is a concern about that. I don't think that's as much of a problem in Leavenworth as it may be in other jurisdictions. The one I get, and it's not necessarily a HUD thing, I've had folks that are upset that they have to put gutters on their home. But really, the point I try to make is this is preserving the value of your home. What I find when I find a home that lacks gutters or has downspouts that don't drain the water more than 5 feet away is you're getting water into your basement. You're creating an environment for rodents and insects. You're creating an environment for mold. So really, getting gutters on your house and draining the water away protects your investment. It's not a detriment. But that is one. I've had a few landlords who have an issue with that. I would suggest Pat probably knows a lot better than I where he gets into detail. I think when he's doing a HUD inspection, he's gonna look at the appliances in a way that I may not when I come into the property. I come in, the renter, the tenant has a specific issue they want me to look at. I will look at other things, but quite frankly, a HUD HQS inspection is much more comprehensive than what I do because it does fall under federal statutes. I hope that answers the question. I think Pat could probably do much more justice to the question than I
So
could.
you're not having many landlords that say, hey, wait, that's out of bounds?
No, absolutely not. And, the two cases I had to take to court were, I do hear from some landlords, I've been doing this for 30 years and this is how I've always done it. And I'm like, sir, I'm sorry, turning off the utilities because you want the tenant to leave is a clear violation of state law. And Judge Prey has made that very clear in cases where I've had to bring that to court.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Mike, did you have a question?
I have a question on moratorium. One of the points you made, Mr. Levine, was moratorium on evictions between September 2020 and March 2021 due to non-payment of rent. Is that going to be extended under this new American Rescue Plan for a longer period of time?
That is a great question. I have watched the news every day as this legislation has moved through its approval process to see if that's going to come up. Now, we do have to caveat that program, it's a moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent.
Right.
If you've committed a crime in the property, if you've destroyed the property, you are still subject to eviction.
Right.
And what we're starting to see, obviously, following the court cases is not really part of what I do, but I do get information. We're seeing landlords start to push back on that. One case that I looked at as I gathered the statistics on evictions for the commission was a tenant who claimed hardship in paying rent, and then the landlord produced their disability payments, where this was an individual making $4,000 a month, and the landlord challenged the validity, and the tenant wasn't able to refute it, and the tenant ended up being evicted.
Well, usually there are two sides to a story. Thank you for that
Absolutely.
answer. Code enforcement, is there any trend with, because we do have, as you mentioned, landlords from, 47 states? So is there any trend between landlords who are live in Leavenworth, the city of Leavenworth, or locally, Lansing, or the county, versus the out-of-state landlords in terms of complaints from tenants?
That's an interesting question. I haven't analyzed and compiled the data quite that way, but the thought would be many of our out-of-state renters are military. There is a networking of renting to other military families as they come through. So actually, and it was kind of a surprise to me, I see less issues with those kind of landlords because of how they are renting out their properties. A non-compliant landlord is just as likely to be somebody local from Leavenworth or the Kansas area, maybe even a little bit more so because of the types of properties that they own. They may have more properties. Of those 47 states, many of them are a landlord who has one property in town that, they've had for 20 years. So I'm not seeing a trend that way. The nice thing, I would want to highlight is we're seeing properties sold off. I'm dealing with large-scale property management firms out of, Dallas, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia, and frankly, they've been fairly easy to work with. A larger organization, I think, recognizes the issue. Their local property manager, I don't always know what the incentives are within that industry, may be less reluctant to spend money, but once the issue is raised to the attention of the property owner, in Seattle, for example, I had one case of a single mother facing COVID. Their refrigerator went out, and after 10 days, it still had not been repaired. With a call to the owner, the problem was fixed within 24 hours.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, can I get one more?
Yes, sir. Okay. And we need to move on pretty soon.
Okay. You mentioned communication, and I should know the answer to this question, but does your office have a web page as part of the city's website?
Yes, absolutely. We have a web page, and I have to special shout out for our public information officer. Melissa and I have done some work with that. There's just some great stuff. She has been invaluable. That's part of the teamwork inside the city family. So yes, that's out there.
Thank you for your very informative and interesting presentation. And can we get a copy of your slide deck?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say great presentation, and I think it was either on slide 2 or 3, when you identified some of the violations, and I noticed there was one particular chart that says discrimination. Can you explain that one more in detail?
So, you know, I get a call, and in the process I've established, you know, anybody who makes a call, I'll open a case, I'll provide assistance. There have been, now obviously, my authorities come from local ordinance and state law, but I am well aware of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the federal protections against discrimination. We do want to have equal opportunity and fair housing. I think that's part of the quality of life in Leavenworth. Generally, I provide assistance in something like that. When I get a call, it's often a referral. You know, here's the office in KCK. If you believe this has risen to the level of a discrimination complaint, here's the process you need to file. We make it very clear we do not provide legal advice or legal assistance, but we will direct a tenant in the avenue that can help them. And fortunately, if you look on the numbers, I think those numbers have actually been very low. But when that issue is raised, I do address the issue.
Okay, appreciate it. Good job. Great
My pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you.
I do, real quick. Yeah, Mr. Levine, yeah, as a rental property coordinator, I would say, and I want your input, you know, because you're the middleman between the landlord and the tenant. So you're allowing them to hopefully have a conversation now that they probably didn't have before, because they can come to you and say, and be more comfortable. So do you think there's more of a positive outcome with a conversation between the two, or you're, you know, an advocate for both?
Well, remember, specifically, the ordinance talks about I'm not supposed to be an advocate for either side,
Right, okay.
but that is absolutely correct. I mean, you know, we're part of the charm of Leavenworth. We are a small town. And in many cases, it's that wow moment, you know, that you're able to bring two people together that, you know, may have thought that they couldn't cooperate because of the nature of their positions. You know, I had one where a tenant called me up and she was convinced that this was an animal living in the attic or had died and that the landlord wasn't being responsive. As I got involved, we ended up finding out, no, your real issue was a plumbing problem. Once the landlord knew the specific nature of the problem, very responsive in getting it repaired. And in many cases, we're getting to the point now, though I do have that authority from you to write citations and to take folks to court, you know, with certain landlords and certain issues, I've gotten to the point where I don't even need to write it up. It's a phone call. It's, hey, you know, I've got landlords calling me up now saying, you know, I got this one tenant and this tenant's just not happy and I want my tenants to be happy. And I've been able to come in and smooth over issues. So yes, that's one of the neat things about the job, I have to say.
And one more question. On the one slide, it said, I think it was 5%, that infestation. What actually is the infestation? I mean, is it just?
So it may be insects, it may be rodents. I mean, in some cases, it's patently clear. You know, when I come in, probably one of the worst cases I've seen in town, there were over a half dozen dead mice in the apartment. The woman called me up, she said, you know, I had them crawling across my bed at night and, you know, but we're able to come in, that gets addressed, and you're told specifically, you need to bring in a licensed exterminator. You know, the code is a little bit flexible in cases like that. It may be an individual is responsible for cleaning up after they've moved in, but when it is a multifamily dwelling, if there are insects or mice in multiple apartments or in common areas, that then very clearly falls back on the owner to remedy the problem.
Okay. No, thank you. Great report. Good
Yes.
job.
Thank you, sir. I think it has been a great thing. I thank you for all your hard work. I hear a lot of good things about from the community about your work. And I know from having worked in home care before that sometimes residents were afraid to complain to their landlord for fear of being evicted. And so I think it's a great thing that we have your work here, and I think the way you've set this up, the agencies and everybody in the community is really supportive. And as far as sharing information, I think Melissa's been doing great with that. I've been sharing it on the United Way Facebook page, and I know several of the agencies have been sharing that too. So thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, annual review of text amendments to development regulations.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. So this is just kind of a first overall look, sort of reminding you all that we do update the development regulations every year, and just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of kind of the categories of things that we're looking at. So what's in the policy report is not an exhaustive list of everything that we're looking at. So this is really just to kind of give you an opportunity, if there's anything that has come up over the last year that you feel like we need to look at, it'll give us a chance to look at updating before we get this through the public hearing process. So really there's, I would say, 3 categories of updates that we make. The first category would be kind of those first 2 examples, just really simple clarifying language in there that has come up that's unclear. Like we have some of our use standards relating to the setbacks of accessory structures. There's nothing wrong with what's in there, it's just the language is a little bit confusing, so just clearing up some things like that. Real easy stuff. The next category would be more actually changing regulations and language. So for example, the temporary signs we had talked about in regards to the political signs before, so really getting that language cleaned up, having talked to city attorney, looking at what other cities are doing, and really getting some new language and regulations in place for that type of thing. Kind of related to that, I know that we'd had a visitor to one of the meetings talk a couple of weeks ago about nonprofits and temporary signs, and so just to kind of let you know, we are taking a look at that, and that's going to come back to a study session, I think, on April 20th. To have a little bit more in-depth conversation with you. So we're in the process right now of kind of researching what other cities do, if they have specific rules, and how that relates to some different uses. So that'll be coming back before we do a public hearing with the text updates. So just to kind of let you know that. And then the final category, so we have our appendix of the development regulations is a use table, which lists all the possible uses for all of the zoning districts. Mm-hmm. And we keep coming up with inconsistencies and uses that are shown to be allowed in districts that really don't make sense, or not allowed in districts where they really should be. So in previous years, we've kind of just gone and done a few updates to a few different uses at a time. What we're doing now is going through that whole table and really making sure that every use that's come up is addressed, or can be addressed, and that they're placed in those appropriate zoning categories. And I was kind of surprised as we went through it, just how many changes actually we really did come up with that were necessary. So that's really the third big one that we're looking at this year. So again, I know that you all hear from people throughout the year, and so just wanted to give you an opportunity, if there is anything that you want us to take a look at and put a little bit of time into researching before we get these, the actual changes brought forward to you. And you don't have to tell me tonight. You can, if you've got notes at home, or if things come up, absolutely always reach out to me and let me know. And we're in the process of working on this right now. So now would be the time to get with me and let us know.
Will these changes take place before this upcoming election?
Yeah, so right now the plan is to have these go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, hopefully at their May meeting. We would typically do it in March or April, but we've got the comprehensive plan coming up that's being adopted, and so that's hopefully going to happen in April, and so wanted to give that a chance to come through to see if there's anything, kind of low-hanging that we could make changes on that. So this will be coming back through in May or June. So if you're asking in regards to the political signs.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so,
Yes, ma'am.
yep, these should all be adopted at some point over the summer. So that would be in place prior to the next election season.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
So the action today is a consensus to move forward with the adoption of proposed text amendments. Is that correct?
That's really not correct, and you know what, that's just kind of
I didn't
carried
think
from
so.
from the previous year.
I don't
So
think
really,
we're ready.
I know.
yeah, there's really no consensus or action needed, just more of an update to kind of where
Okay.
we're at.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
yeah,
but
yeah,
just
and so again, if there's
information.
anything that you thought of or that comes up, let me know.
Okay.
And we'll absolutely, put some research into that, and we can,
Okay.
when we come back on the 20th with, discussion for the temporary signs for nonprofits, if there's anything else that you've come up with, we can address that at that time as well.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions?
Quick
Yeah.
question. Ms. Hurley, on section 8.04C, signs excluded from the permit, talks about temporary signs and talks about particular days. These are not just for political signs. In reality, they are. But if I put up a temporary sign that fits this, I can only put it up during election season, even if it's not about a candidate. Am I correct?
No, so this is just sort of a little snapshot of the whole sign code. And so, no, temporary sign, this is just really relating to signs in the right-of-way, this little snippet
Right.
that we have here. So that time period would be the only time period that temporary signs would be allowed in the right-of-way. Outside of that 45-day period, temporary signs are allowed on private property based on other regulations that are in that whole sign code.
But if I have a temporary sign, but it's not a political sign, the only time that I can put it up is during political season.
In the right.
In the
of way.
right-of-way, in the right-of-way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't do it in the right of way anyway. But now you can in this 45 days. So you are right. In 45 days before the election, the right of way can have a slew of signs in them.
Yeah, I can put, you
Good.
know, an ice
And
cream
put my
parlor
United Way
sign.
signs
or-
up there,
There you go.
Because you can't determine based on content.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
right next
So
to
we
a
can
political
have-
sign.
There you
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and so, so this
So
is
you
after
did the
talking with,
community sign out there.
City Attorney Waters and looking at what other cities have done, and Paul's exactly right, we can't really regulate based on the content of a sign.
Right.
So we can't say a political sign is allowed in the right of way, but not a
Ice cream
roofing
parlor.
company sign. So, and what other cities who have similar language to this have found is that they don't have that glut of signs, random signs in the right of way. There will be some that pop
Sure.
up, as there are any other time of the year, signs pop up in the right of way and code enforcement officers pull those. So, that will happen a little bit, but other cities have not found that the right of way is just littered with hundreds of
Well, no one,
random signs.
my question is, does someone ever test that? Let's say I'm gonna do an ice cream parlor, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
using that as an example. And I wanna put it up in, July, in a non-election year.
Mm-hmm.
And you come out and say, no, you only put it up 45 days before the election and 3 days after. I mean, said, my ice cream parlor has nothing to do with an election. Why are you making a special class for political signs? I want to advertise my ice cream parlor. You let other people.
You can't
That-
just put it in the right of way, though.
No, I know, but the only time you can do it is during election season. Say you want to put up Christmas trees for sale. That's not in election season. I could just see someone saying, hey, wait a minute. You know, you don't say political signs, but in reality, we all know it's political signs. That's what I'm afraid of. Somebody could, and I think they possibly have a valid point.
I'm not aware of any legal cases to that effect, and that's one reason we have a city attorney to
Yeah.
kind of keep an eye on that for us. And so, this language is based on state
No, I
statute.
understand.
So, I'm not aware that there's been any legal challenges. I 100% understand what you're
Yeah.
saying. Someone could certainly bring that up, and I guess we would, cross that bridge if and when that
Yeah,
happened.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Julie?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is review downtown improvements and efforts.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commission.
Evening.
So this is kind of serving as a precursor to your goal-setting session to go over a lot of the efforts that the city has undertaken to not only invest and beautify downtown, but I'd like to start with going over the few commission goals that are in your 2020 to 2021 document, just to refresh your memory. So the first one is in downtown development and revitalization, and that goal is to plan or pursue the future downtown and northeast improvement projects using all available recruitment and retention methods. The second is to explore efforts to improve the aesthetic appearance of downtown, including lawn maintenance, landscaping, reducing litter, and decorative elements. Under community appearance and image, that's to engage in partnerships to benefit the look, feel, perception, and quality of life in the city, as well as determination of options to focus on blighted properties and using opportunities available to the city. So, over the past essentially 18 months, throughout the pandemic, while a lot of things stopped, we continued improvements in the downtown, and that includes ADA improvements, so ramps and other items, especially related to the new parking lot that was installed at the Youth Achievement Center corner, the northeast corner of 3rd and Delaware. And then we also designed the remaining parking lot at 3rd and Cherokee, which is planned for 2021. The pavement management program is taking care of downtown streets, including the entire city. So you've seen some mill and overlay projects through there. The Parks and Recreation Department is continuing with their painting upgrades and wood repairs, especially on benches and picnic tables throughout different city parks. In 2020, we did upgrade all of the downtown streetlights to LED. Those are some of the few streetlights that are owned by the city in the city. The stormwater program has continued to make its impact on the community, especially in downtown with the aging infrastructure. I'm sure many of you have noticed the new street signs throughout the downtown in that historic format with the brown historic street signs. And of course, our downtown bridges have continued to be inspected. The sidewalk cost share program, with the recent increase in that program, people have taken advantage of that over the past year. The community center stone replacement project, that enormous undertaking, is completed, further beautifying the area. Cherokee Street over 3 Mile Creek was rehabilitated. The library, including other upgrades in there related to the bathrooms and the atrium area, the landscaping was redone. And the wayfinding signage was completed right at the start of the pandemic last year, which has helped people who have visited the downtown, but I think it'll serve us well in the future with more visitors coming in. So shifting a little bit to investment in small businesses in the downtown, we had 7 grants awarded in 2020, which amounted to approximately $35,000, improving businesses in the downtown that use that for signage or improvements to their facade, moving of walls, things of that nature. And after analyzing the COVID relief grants, the majority of them were awarded to businesses in the downtown, and it assisted them in their losses of revenue and added expenses. I also analyzed the Network Kansas entrepreneurship community loans that we've issued over time, and 49 of those loans since the inception of the program in 2012 timeframe, 2011 and 2012, we provided 49 of those loans, which was $1.3 million in capital given to small businesses in the downtown. So looking ahead to the future, over the next time period, we'll have the large 4th Street reconstruction project, which will completely overhaul 4th Street through the downtown with the grant award that we received from KDOT. So city staff is planning on researching and exploring additional streetscaping opportunities and aesthetic improvements related to signage and beautification, landscaping, to hopefully include in that project. The continuation of the downtown parking lot program, where the commission will continue to identify a parking lot per year to reconstruct. We also have quite a bit of opportunity with the city-owned 301 Delaware, where we demolished the building that half demolished itself, and Our partnerships throughout the downtown also assist us in beautification. So with Wendy from Main Street here, she is placing banners through her program at all of the city parking lots to clearly mark where people can park, and so that'll also enhance the downtown area. Esplanade Street is planned for a mill and overlay to enhance the Camp Leavenworth Festival area, since that'll be a high-profile event. City Hall's also going to be going under some repairs to the parapet and needed maintenance on the exterior of the building to continue its standing in the downtown. And then replacement of all the brick sidewalks and handicap ramps in front of the community center will also help improve access to that vital venue that we have, the jewel of the community center. We've also had a lot of private investment, as well as partnership through Main Street for outdoor art, rehabilitation of properties like the former Catholic High School into the Trademark by Wyndham Boutique Hotel. Upper story apartments are continuing to move forward or have been completed. And the downtown continues to be at an all-time high occupancy rate, and there are lots of improvements to storefronts that business owners and property owners are completing. But that is my brief overview of some of the efforts that the city has undertaken with the downtown. So this is more of an informational session. If you have any questions or suggestions.
Mr. Tedder, quick question. For the COVID relief business grants, is there any money left available for that?
Yes, so we've given out nearly $150,000 in 50 grants. So that means we still have about $100,000 available.
Good.
I've had a few come in for tomorrow's award, but yeah, it's still available.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Questions?
Do you know when the Wyndham at IMAC will open?
I heard late,
I heard May 1st.
okay, I
I
heard
mean,
late May.
I've heard that too, I'm just, what are you hearing, I'm just wondering.
Last I heard was late May, but I would assume,
We just got notified last week, June 1st.
Oh, June
June
1st.
1st.
Okay, June
Okay.
1st, okay.
So I think, but initially May 1st is what they.
Yeah.
Okay.
and I'll reach out to my contacts there and
Maybe
make
they
sure
would
that
do
we're
a
all
grant
invited
opening
to
or
the
something.
ribbon cutting and
Okay,
opening and
thank you.
everything like that.
Okay.
I have a question in terms of opportunity with redevelopment of 301 Delaware and other available properties. I mean, I know the Leavenworth Main Street organization does that, but does the city have some of this information on its website, or how do you, because that 301 Delaware, I mean, we've had that for a couple years, and so how are these opportunities communicated to the broader public?
Typically, with that property especially, developers approach the city, so then we make them aware of it and work with them on it. I believe exploring listing it with a commercial realtor might be an option.
But in general, I mean, they would just be aware that this property is available. I mean, the general, the developers that are in the metro area, in terms of them contacting you, do we have enough information out there, I guess is my point, with respect to these opportunities?
So how 301 Delaware would work is normally somebody will pick the downtown of Leavenworth first.
Okay.
And then once they've honed in on Leavenworth, they'll either connect with Wendy or Taylor, and then that's when we'll make them available of it. We've thought about listing it. There's not a lot of just drive through to see, a real estate sign there would be, I'm really looking forward to coming to Leavenworth, what's available, and that's when we would push them in that direction.
That's fine.
That's a good question, yeah.
I just wanted to understand the process a little bit. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Tedder.
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, that is everything on the agenda. Mr. Kramer.
No, I'm not gonna steal the thunder of the parade, but just a reminder that,
Literally.
The thunder, I know.
Done.
Just a reminder that if you are scheduled for your COVID vaccine, that they are still going on tomorrow at the Riverfront Community Center, and we have made adjustments to the route, and then we have also, we'll have some people down there trying to help people to make sure that we get in there. I've been informed that the health department is doing another 3,500 vaccines this week, so it's going to be crowded in that area, but please be patient if you're down in that area. That was just a message the police chief wanted me to pass along.
Okay. Well, speaking of that, speaking of vaccines, it sounds like we are moving to level 3 pretty soon, which is great. I follow the COVID positivity week to week. I do it a little differently than the health department does, but this past week, it's been less than 1%. So that's from when we had implemented the mask ordinance back in October or November. It was at 12%.
Yes.
Week to week, so that's a huge improvement. With that, the mask ordinance expires on March the 31st. And so we need to know what your option is. We don't have to do anything at all if we just let it go expire at the end of that time. But if we do want to extend it, then it would have to be brought up as a new ordinance. So I guess I need to know what your thoughts are before next week.
And we, I mean, without saying whether we're gonna extend it or just let it expire, is there some benefit in having a short discussion next week or not? That's kind of what I'm asking. I mean,
If that's up to the rest of the commission.
What do you mean, like a consensus?
I mean, if we have a
Just that
consensus
this-
to just
just-
let it run out, this is it. I mean, that's
Okay.
all we would need to do.
Right.
So I guess that's,
That's
So
one
if-
commissioner. Oh, go ahead.
So is that what we're doing? We're trying to get a consensus to just keep it, to let it,
well, we don't have to do anything at all.
right?
But if we want to look at the possibility of extending it past the 31st, we would have to have a new ordinance, is what I'm saying. So,
As one
Commissioners?
commissioner, I say let it expire.
okay,
Yeah, the city has played an important role filling the gap that the county created. We have achieved goals with the mask mandate, the significant decline of cases, and people being able to be vaccinated. So I say let it expire.
I think it's still up for discussion. I think our closest neighbor, Fort Leavenworth, they're not allowing theirs to expire. They started theirs before us. And I think it should be evaluated. I wonder what the city of Lansing is going to do. It has not inhibited business, in my opinion. I mean, I think some people may argue that, but I'd like to see some empirical facts that that has, in fact, inhibited business. We don't have any draconian measures such as limiting capacity in bars or restaurants or limiting business hours. I'm not saying that we do extend it, but what are our community partners doing? Specifically Fort Leavenworth, which is really part of Leavenworth, and Lansing, which is part of Leavenworth. I think it has been successful. I've had many people say to me, don't do it. I've had many people say, thank you for doing it, business owners, because it gives them, for lack of a better term, cover. So they want it, but if there's no mandate, when they tell a customer, the customer says, no, I don't have to do that. And, they don't want to lose a customer, but it gives them cover if they want it, and the customer comes without one and says, hey, I'm sorry, you have to wear one, and it's worked positively. I don't see the negative of it. I'm not saying because it's not negative we extend it, but I think we should evaluate it a little bit more and make that decision. And the decision may be that we let it expire March 31st. That's all I have to say.
okay.
So this would, I support what Commissioner Preisinger just said, which would be to have a discussion about evaluating what's taken place, what has taken place over the last, 2 months when we last extended it versus going forward with the vaccination program. Would that be during next week's meeting? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it is gonna be extended, it's gonna have to be done next week, because it
Right.
expires 31 March unless we have a special meeting. Yeah, but I don't know what the consensus is right now.
And there would have to be a new ordinance written for next
Correct.
week.
Correct.
Well, my thought now was with the 20% having been vaccinated in our community, my thought is that by March 31st, I mean, we aren't there yet, but by March 31st, I think we are gonna have a lot more vaccines done here. I think we're gonna be opening up the schools, and I would be okay with just letting it expire. Now, if things go south, we can always do another ordinance later, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be supportive of that, because we're gonna have to watch things because of these
Sure.
variants and what's happening in Europe right now.
Right.
Over the last week or two, there's been a 10% increase in the instances of the cases, so, I would reinforce what you say there, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
And, at this point, I feel like I am okay with letting it, expire. But I do get concerned, and there may be a reason that we have to come back and readdress it. I hope that's not the case, because I know we are making very, very good progress as far as all the key metrics with respect to the disease. You mentioned the positivity test rate, the number of cases over the 14-day moving average. All those have been going, consistently down since
But I
we
would,
took this up.
with that in mind, I would encourage, as our health, our health following the science here, to continue to wear a mask.
Yes.
To
And the
continue to
social
wear a mask, and to
distancing and getting
continue the social.
vaccinations.
And getting your
and,
vaccinations,
trying
yes.
to stay away from large congregate settings. Yeah, I think we have definitely, I know as one commissioner, that's something I would want to continue to encourage our citizens within the city.
So it's my understanding, go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead, you were gonna say.
It's just my understanding that we have a consensus to, at this point, let it run out.
I believe that, yeah.
So we don't have to do anything.
Question, Mr. Kramer, if this does expire, sounds like it's going to, can you, at City Hall right now, there is a mask requirement to come in here. Would there still be a mask requirement? Could there still be one?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yeah, city buildings are decisions made essentially with consultation to the commission, but they're made by the city manager.
okay, so you can do that.
And-
And so, city building, at meetings here, et cetera, we still need to be masked. And businesses in town, if they still require a mask, they can still enforce that
They
by.
absolutely have a right to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to make that.
And we have reached out, hopefully we'll get some information to you tomorrow, to some of our big partners, Walmart and Dillon's and Home Depot, to try to get you some information on what their corporate office is going to be. So I'll try
That's
to
a
get
good
that out
idea.
as fast as we can.
Okay, that would be great.
I did talk to Fort Leavenworth, a representative of Fort Leavenworth, and I know that they are possibly looking at it mid-April, but their guess is it's going to be still in effect till 31 May.
That could be, but they are federal, so, I mean,
Yeah.
they have
But, I
to
mean,
think
they're
about their
part-
properties all over the country where
But
things might be a lot worse than they are here,
It
too.
is federal, but each CG, each commanding general of the installation has the authority to turn
Okay.
it off. So, and they're basically city, part of us, but they're gonna continue theirs.
Okay, I think we've got our direction here. Anything else for the good of the community here?
Happy
Please
St.
come to
Patrick's
the,
Day.
yeah, happy St. Patrick's Day. Come to the parade tomorrow. It's probably going to be raining, but it starts at noon and lineup starts at 11, and the parade route goes to 2nd Street, as our city manager said, and not Esplanade like it has in the past. So come down and enjoy it. We
How many
will.
floats, how many entries are there, do you know?
About 40-ish the
Yeah,
last.
you were there.
Okay.
You were there.
But there's
I wasn't
always
there.
those last minute,
Oh,
I mean, there are probably people tonight going on saying, hey, we want to be in it, we want to be in
Yeah,
it, so
usually the
we'll
way it
see.
is. So anyway, everybody have a good week.
Okay.
All right, we are adjourned.